Hello, welcome to Pass the Tots. I am your occasional co-host, Patricia DeBough, head of marketing here at Nutrislice. Today, I am happy to have with me two of Nutrislice's co-founders, Brian Crapo and Mike Craig. Hi, Brian. Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Hello, Patricia.
Hello. There's our normal regular host, Mike. So thank you for taking a bit of a different role today.
That's right.
But we're
It's a different seat.
exactly. How's it feel?
Yeah, I'm getting used to it.
Good. Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, I hope you both are doing well today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Uh, excellent. Glad to have you. All right. So we are going to get right into it. We have a really exciting topic today. We are going to be talking about, we have a new product on the market. It's called Nutrislice Spotlight. And so to get right into it, I would love for one of you, let's start with Brian. Can you tell us what is Spotlight?
All right. Well, let me hold one up for you here. Spotlight is digital food labels. They look like this.
Sweet. Look
They're
at that.
They're small form factor, battery powered, little screens, mini screens, kind of like digital signage, but smaller. And you can put them right next to your food. You can put all sorts of information on them. And it's an e-ink screen, kind of like a Kindle device. So it's not like your laptop or your computer. But they're pretty exciting little guys. They come in different sizes. I'll hold up a larger one here. You can put, this one's got a list of food items on it with the name and price.
That's cool.
That smaller one had more information about a single item on it. But yeah, it's the Spotlight is the new cool thing.
Spotlight is awesome. Operators from the beginning of like serving food have always tried to communicate, here's what is being offered today at my location, at my cafe. And they've always tried to be innovative and do it really well and make it easy on them. About 50 years ago, they came out with this idea of a digital menu board, a TV screen. They're like, hey, we should put some TV screens right next to our food. And, that's how we can do it. You've also seen like print cards and the evolution of these two technologies of kind of communicating the menu at the point of service is old. It's about 50 years old. And what you're seeing are customers who are demanding this new they just want an immersive experience. They have questions and they want answers. They want to know what's in the food. What does it contain? Where was it made? How is it? What are you going to do with all the food waste? All these questions are more and more relevant and more necessary to answer. And operators are, they're on board. They want to do this. And so they're like, hey, we're going to bring transparency forward. We'll do it at the point of service. And so you've seen these TV screens that are getting more interactive and more dynamic with the menu data. You're seeing these print cards that are now showing like icons for special diets and allergies. And, it's been going. It's happening. The pandemic comes and it just kind of throws everyone's world into just chaos. And supply chains, labor shortages, all these challenges of operating a food service program are now at the forefront of everyone's mind. And it's causing all sorts of pain and challenges at that communication point on the point of service. How do I update my prices when it feels like every day my prices are changing and adjusting? And having to do all this work day in and day out has created just a real pain and a real need for a simplified solution. And so the digital food card, this label that we have created where it's tracked and maintained automatically, with technology and software, has really simplified, smoothed out the operator experience and allowed the customer to get that information proximate to the food, be happy with what's going on, and be confident that they're getting the right information, and to enjoy the experience.
Love it. So, Brian, you held up the actual Spotlight devices. Can you walk us through what information is actually available to the customer when they're walking up and they're looking at a food item? What type of information can an operation provide to their customers through the Spotlight digital food label?
Great question. So it's almost anything you might want to put there. And, it's a combination of images and text. The screen is actually an e-ink screen. So it's not like your phone or your laptop where it's if you turned off all the lights in your room and had that device on, it would light up the room. This is more like an old Palm Pilot or Kindle device where it's an e-ink screen. They use 3 colors: red, black, and white, and the battery life lasts forever. But the information on it, you can put. I'll hold this one up. You can see this one's got the name, the price, uh, there's icons here for the nutrition information, calories, and even a QR code if someone wanted to point their mobile phone at it and get even more information. There's just there's a lot of storytelling that people want to do around their foods. A lot of thought and intention goes into what you're putting out there, and being able to put that information on a digital screen is helpful.
Historically, like food cards have always been kind of name, price. That was the critical check boxes that you needed on a food card. But too many experiences of people coming and saying like, does this have gluten in it? And, where is this made? And just being able to kind of tell a more robust story is captured in the food label in the Spotlight product that we have.
Yeah, I would
to
also
tell better stories.
Yeah, I was just talking to a client and they wanted to put, how sustainable the product is on there, right? So, how far did this product travel before it got to this cafe? So people are not just labeling for allergens and price. They're telling that story about, who they are as a brand, where their food comes from, how it's prepared. If this is a chef recipe, it's locally sourced. All those things that customers care about when they're trying to decide, should I eat this food or not?
Yeah, I think to me, the story that I've always heard are organizations that have made a commitment to transparency with their menus. And they've brought that transparency with the printed signs that they do approximate to the food. And the challenges of the pandemic and supply chain and all of that have just made it incredibly difficult to maintain that standard of and that commitment to transparency. So the food label, when we went to the drawing board, we said absolutely needs to be able to bring forward and help our customers who are committed to showing these things, this information. Let's make sure that they can still do that, do it appropriately, effectively, and with confidence. Now, the caveat to it all is the QR code, Brian. I was going to ask, like, when did QR codes kind of become a thing?
That's a good question. I feel like, they've been around a long time, but they really started to take off when the phone manufacturers started making the normal camera application read them. You used to have to download a special application that would only read
A special
some
app
of
for
them.
it, yeah.
And so one app would only read certain types of codes, and it was a little harder than it is today, where you just point your phone at it and it just works.
They came out, and I remember thinking, oh, that's kind of cool, but nobody used it, and it never made sense because I had to have a unique app to read the QR code. And the pandemic came, and QR codes just have like totally come back with a vengeance. Everyone has experiences as they've ventured back out to dining facilities where the QR code is plastered on the table and they have to scan the code to get the menu. And you just see more and more QR codes. So as the acceptance and acceptability of QR codes is kind of increased, we're like, why don't we just throw a QR code onto these labels? And with that, we can now point, customers to a myriad of things and creativity, marketing, menus, more complete, ingredient list, like whatever you would like to do, you can send your customers there with the QR code. And I just think it's pretty cool.
So tell us a little bit about how Spotlight works.
That's awesome. Spotlight totally works. It's all technology based. It's meant to make the life of the operator that much better, that much easier. So first off, you've got a digital menu, a menu planning system, a source of truth where when you update or create a new recipe, it goes in that system. Keep that. That needs to stay the same. You have one source of truth that should always be your source of truth. What the Spotlight label is going to do is tap into that through the API that Nutrislice has with whatever system that you're using, your system of record. So that source, Nutrislice taps into it, And then Nutrislice, what we do is we design these digital experiences. So we take the menus and the food items, everything, the recipes, we pull that into our system, our ecosystem, and then we say, all right, we got to tell a story here. And this is how much real estate we have. It's just a little label. So what information do we need to pull down? Do we need menu name? Do we need pricing? Do we need a QR code that redirects to a website? Labels as far as like allergies and special diets and icons. So Nutrislice, what we're really good at is taking that entire database, formatting it to a unique, specific screen size, and then pushing that there. And we maintain that connection. So when you update recipes, you update food items in your single source of truth, it just automatically flows down to a food label. And so, there's all sorts of nuances there, being able to schedule, being able to time it, knowing updates, being able to do that in real time. But essentially, that is how it works. Now, the label, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, this is like low tech, just amazing technology where it runs off of Bluetooth. And so there's Bluetooth kind of communication happening with a hub, a base station that really is also pretty simple. It's like a little router that you can hide or hang. And this router kind of communicates by Bluetooth to all the labels that you might have in your location, in your cafe. And it's just talking, they're sending information. Hey, update your Reuben sandwich. Hey, the Diet Coke is no longer this price. It better go up so that we can maintain some semblance of profitability here. So, it's just always talking, making updates as you are adjusting your central database single source of truth. Now, there's some nuances to all this, Brian. I'm sure this is my non-technical answer. Is there anything I'm missing that you would add?
That's a fantastic answer, Mike. Probably just some details around it. I'll add, the
Whew.
But great job. Each hub or each base station can talk to up to 5,000 labels, so you don't have to worry about overloading these things. And then
5,000 labels.
They've got
that's insane.
Yeah, they've got a radius of about 20 meters, so they have a pretty good distance. So if you have a pretty large space, then you might need more than one. But if it's if you got a 40-meter diameter, you've got you can put a lot of labels in there.
What are some of the use cases that we're seeing as we're talking to operators about Spotlight? What are some of the ways that we envision and that we're also hearing from operators that they're going to be using these devices?
Well, I think it really falls into two categories at the highest level. There's the retail side, where it's a lot about price management, and then the dining side or the prepared food side, where if you pick up a plate, you're not going to have the nutrition facts on the back, and so you want to tell a story about that food. Where did it come from? How's it prepared? So the allergen labeling, the other storytelling types of things you might want to put on there, nutrition information. So folks are putting them out there wherever they've got food. It could be in a cooler, on a shelf, but it tends to be either a retail environment or a sort of a traditional food service environment that's like a dining hall or a cafe.
Brian, can you give us an example of one of those use cases that you just talked about?
Sure. We were just out at a pretty large college campus, and the director there, we were walking through one of his C stores, so a retail location, and he had all these paper labels out. Obviously, everything had sort of like a name and a price. And we just asked, "Hey, do you do a lot of labeling?" And you should have seen his face. He was like, "Oh, let me tell you, I have."
That's all I do,
right? And he proceeded to tell us about all of this pain that his team experiences. He has a lady who's almost her full-time job is managing those labels, because the price is changing so much these days, and they don't want food walking out the door for less than they bought it for. And so several times a week, she's got to spend most of the day receiving the products, figuring out what the new price is and how it compares to the price that they've got published, because they need to honor those prices. If they're putting a price out there and saying it costs a certain amount, it doesn't matter if they paid $2 for it. If they're selling it for $1.50, it's walking out the door for $1.50. And so she makes sure that doesn't happen. And she spends a lot of time printing and clicking around on the computer and then trying to find where's the beef jerky, where did I put that one? And we pulled one of these out and we said, would this be nice to have? And his jaw hit the floor and he was like, "Oh my goodness, I could give her old job back. Like she could do what I hired her to do." And that's the kind of thing where that's the reaction we tend to get from operators, is they're like, "Wait a minute, this is a thing. I could have this," and they're really excited about the possibilities.
And you push them to quantify price, didn't you? Like how much would you be saving or potentially be losing? Or what was it? You asked for some numbers in terms of dollars.
Sure, yeah. I mean, and he was calculating it off of the labor hours saved from this lady being able to go and do something else. They have enough challenges hiring folks, so she could go do her old job, and it was like 70% of her salary was his estimate. And every operation is going to be different. There's a materials savings if you're doing a lot of printing and laminating. But a lot of the value in terms of cost savings is going to come from the labor that you're just saving. It's so much easier to say, I changed the price, I hit the button, and it's I have to go. I don't have to print. I don't have to cut. I don't have to laminate. I don't have to walk over. I can do it all from one central location. Yeah, a lot of time savings.
So Brian, can you talk a little bit about what is the industry landscape around food labeling today? What's the technology landscape that's available for operators prior to Spotlight?
It's a great question. Obviously there's digital signage, and the larger form factor of digital screens that's been around for a really long time. Providers like Nutrislice, and there's a bunch of other folks that do digital signage. That's everyone's pretty familiar with that. A lot of folks are not aware of the digital food labels, and they're a newer thing. They've seen a lot of traction out in Europe. When we found them, we ran into them in big box stores, like the retailers like Kohl's and Home Depot. I know Walmart's testing them out. It feels like a lot of those retail solutions are embracing this technology because it saves them a lot of labor and improves the guest experience, the customer experience. One of the challenges that if you just bought from the manufacturer these labels, when we looked at it, we said, hey, this looks really cool. And then we looked at it from, well, would it work in food service? And we were like, I mean, not unless you plugged it into a platform like Nutrislice. And so that's one of the things we're most excited about, is that a digital food label is great if it's built for food service, if it's really easy to manage, right? When you're in the heat of the moment of lunch, and you've got a line of customers going out the door, you're not going to take the time to walk into the back and fight with software and try to update a bunch of your food labels. You might pull out your phone and 86 an item or zero it out, take it off the menu if it's 3 taps and you're done. And that's and also, like, if you've got like 1,000 items, if you can integrate with your menu management system, it's going to be helpful. But if you can't do those types of things, like pull data out of a menu management system, stay synced with that system, if you can't 86, if you can't do a cycle menu, there's all these things that if you could, it would be a fantastic solution. And we thought, hey, we're already doing all of that for digital signage, for the web, for mobile. We could do that and bring the power of Nutrislice to these digital labels, and they would be a fantastic fit. We're the only company that's doing that. We're really excited about our ability to bring it to market. So yeah, it's really, your options are we haven't seen anyone doing something like this in food service, and we're excited to bring something that's a really great fit to the market.
Patricia, the other day we were at a college campus. We strolled into the residential dining area. The team was just thrilled to introduce us to this facility. It was amazing. It was immaculate. Just like had all sorts of stations, just big, massive, just great food all around. And each station we'd walk up and we're just curious about their labels, and they would go, a couple feet behind. They had a little storage place, and they would pull out like this massive, massive Rolodex of food labels. And it basically was like a database of all their foods that they would serve at that station. And so when they'd switch out from breakfast to lunch, if that was when we were there, they'd essentially have to pull out all the breakfast foods from their labels that they had, their print labels, and then they'd have to try to alphabetize them or keep them in order. And then they'd have to go pull out all their lunch labels for the day and then, put them in their appropriate spots. And you times that by like, I think this dining hall had about 10 locations that they were maintaining there. And each one kind of had their own unique little process for doing it. And it was great to see it in action. I'm like, hey, that's awesome. So what happens when you change the recipe to your marinara sauce? So that's going to impact your Italian station. It potentially has impact in a handful of other places where marinara sauce is the key ingredient. And they just looked and they're like, don't even go there. And I'm like, no, I have to. Like, what happens? And they're like, well, first off, we'll make the change in our database, our nutrient database, and then we'll have to update a template, a Microsoft Word file that has that marinara sauce on it. And then, or at least, and everything that recipe touches, right? So any other food item. And then we have to update those food cards, the templates for them. And then we have to mail them out to each one of these location leaders, right? Or at least, to the facility. And then we trust them that they print out, that they do all this work, and so that the label is properly updated. And, you look at them and you're like, how's that going? They just want to take off their shoe and smack you in the head. And they're like, it's chaos right now. And I'm like, well, what's chaotic about it? And she's like, well, so-and-so over here at this station, really good. Type A stays on top of everything. Over here, like they're just so busy, doing these food items that they don't really keep their food labels up to date. And, over here, they do a good job, but you can kind of see like it's just disorderly. They don't quite have the system kind of locked down. And so sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. And I'm like, well, what happens when it's wrong? They're like, well, students complain. I'm like, why are they complaining? Because the information's wrong. Or they're being told something. This really scares the dietitian. They're being told that this food item doesn't contain this ingredient or this allergy, when in fact, because of the recipe update, it did. And that fear kind of sits in the heart of a dietitian, and it's ever present. And they're just like, anytime there's an update, they're just, please, please, please. I hope all our managers are checking in and can go through this process. And, like the state of the digital state of food cards prior to what Nutrislice has with Spotlight, very much centered around that process where you're just kind of, you're using technology, a template, you've got your system, your nutrient system, and you're just kind of hoping that, as you make these changes, that each one of your locations is on top of their game and making the updates and able to communicate that out. And that was the state. That's the state of the industry for food cards prior to what we were doing. And what we said is like it's a lot to rely on just to update a food item. It's a huge process that just needs to go away. Like it's just too many variables. Things get busy, as Brian had mentioned. Like it's probably the last thing that anyone wants to do is make sure that the food label is updated or switched, printed out. Like no one really wants to spend, even if it's just 2 minutes to update that. We just don't have time for it. So we just said we need to remove that process entirely, and technology can do that. It can make lives easier and better. So operationally, that's what the food label does. We've tried to evolve from a print signage, a print card, to something that's digitally maintained and managed, that gives control back to the dietitian and trust that when they make an update, within a matter of seconds, it's ready to go. The kitchen teams, it's easier for them. It's more convenient. They don't have that nagging, oh, I have to do this in order to function in my role. And that ironing that out creates much better customer experiences. It's easier to smile at customers because you're not stressed out from having to manage a Rolodex of food cards. You can smile a little easier.
Patricia, what Mike just said, I think is interesting, because at Nutrislice, we're often being compared to like another technology solution. And we'll often talk about how operators don't want their teams, in the back fighting software. They want them out front with customers, or working on the food, doing their job rather than fighting software. And
it's also I think the job that they love.
Yeah.
I think most operators would tell you they're in it for the food and, the creativity and the being able to serve customers. That's what they love. That's what they want to be doing with their days, not sitting on their laptop
Yeah.
back in their office stuck.
It's the
Nobody's waking up in the morning saying, "Oh, I can't wait to get into the office and update all my food labels and make sure that
right.
the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted." Like, that is going to be
I
amazing.
just can't wait.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
No one's
Right.
wanting that.
Yeah. And this with Spotlight and with labeling, they're often not fighting technology as much as it's process and paper. And I lost the corn dog label. Has anyone seen it? It's like
Mhm.
Can I borrow your corn dog label?
it's a whole different set of challenges that you're just wiping slate from the clean from the slate and saying like, hey, it can be better, and can we, this might be able to help.
3 years from now, I think like digital Spotlight, Nutrislice Spotlight is going to take off. Like 3 years from now, it's just going to get to the point where operators are going to be like, what were we thinking when we tried to like manually update and manually like change all of our food labels? That just made no sense. And the fact that we can put it on technology and just eliminate so much of the operator's experience so that they're freed up to do other things. 3 years from now, we're going to look back and be like, that was a no-brainer. Like, why didn't we do that sooner? and I can't wait, to hear those conversations.
Love it. We talk a lot about wanting to improve both the customer experience and the operator experience, because both of those things we feel are equally important and super critical to a great operation. So we've been talking about operator pain and what that solves, what Spotlight solves for the operator. Let's talk a little bit more about the customer experience, because obviously the end user, the audience for the information that Spotlight provides is the customer. Mike, you like to talk a little bit about kind of this new level of convenience. Can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by new level of convenience and what that means for
Sure.
the customer?
And I'll just say at the outset, like, yes, this is awesome. We should talk about this. The convenience, it might not be the exact word to use, because it's, if I'm a student on campus, seeing a paper label versus seeing a digital label, it's not like it's saving me more time on the student side, the customer experience. However, the one thing that we do, for the past 6 months have been studying and learning on is just consumer trust. And I've walked into so many facilities and they've got print signage, and it's printed. So there's print on paper, and then all of a sudden there's ink. I've got an orange pen in my hand, and someone goes by and they cross out the price and they put a new price next to it because they didn't want to print out the label. Or, they cross out, they scribble out maybe one of the allergy icons or something like that, whatever that needs to be. And what we have studied, what we found is that, like, when you ask a customer, hey, here's experience A, and it's paper and it's got some scribbled ink all over it. Maybe there's some changes to it. We've all had experience. We walked into a cafe and they actually like black it out, a piece of tape that blacks something out, or they put something above a TV screen. Kind of the same analogy here. But we ask them, like, when you see that kind of experience, how much trust do you have in like what's happening behind the counter? And they'll give us an answer. And quite honestly, the answer is lower. It's like, why can't they figure it out? Like, why do they? It feels like they're making mistakes. Quite honestly, like they put an answer down and they had to scribble it out because it was wrong, and here's the right answer. Or it feels like they're just not as well buttoned up as they should be as an operation. So what we have seen is that consumer trust actually goes down when you have those kind of experiences that you're providing. For whatever reason, it's probably just the generation and just how connected they are to technology. But something digital does something to the psyche where it increases trust. And when you see something on a digital screen or on your phone, you just think like, yes, that is right. And so we'll ask them, we'll show them a digital label and we'll be like, look at this. What do you think? How much trust do you have? And they're like, this program, this operation, this cafe knows what they're doing. And I trust exactly what's being what's being shown to me on a digital screen. So, I wouldn't couch it so much as, consumer convenience as much as it is like, this is how you build trust and you build a reputation as a really strong brand, a trustworthy brand where, your customers, they come in, they believe, they get what they're after, the information, the menu, they have a good experience, they come back. When they get something less than that, uh, they kind of feel like it's a ma and pa operation. They're kind of flying by the seat of their pants, and that, it can be endearing to some extent, but usually trust is a lot lower there.
Patricia, we were with a client and they invited us to eat within their cafe, and they were doing paper labeling, and they were very interested in the digital labels. And one of the reasons that they said they were interested is because of accuracy. They said, look, it's so hard to update the paper labels that, sometimes they're not accurate. And I don't think they were one of the ones that was using markers or pens to scribble on things, but they had some, so I went through their stir fry line and I was trying to figure out which sauce I was going to use. And I was just looking at calories, and it was like 800, 700 and like 40,000. And I was like, I think that one's wrong. And I asked, they said, oh yeah, it's got to be like the case, right? Because the serving size was like really large on it, right? So it was, it was just so hard.
Did you try it?
And that wasn't the one I chose because I was like, I don't know.
You should have tried it. You'd be like, wow, this is amazing.
It was probably the best sauce I probably missed out, right? It was a lost opportunity. It would have been really good sauce. But, there's like...
It would have to be for 40,000 calories right? To be worth it.
I'd have to do some running after that. But, it was... So accuracy, I think, improves trust, right? But I also think there's something, going back to what we said earlier, one of the biggest impacts on the guest experience, I think, is going to come through making life easier for the operators, for that team that's on site. If they're that much happier, that much more satisfied with their job, and if they're actually there in front with customers rather than in the back fighting software and then coming out frustrated because that wasn't fun, like that has an impact. It has an impact on employee retention, satisfaction, but that shows up in the guest experience as well. When the guests are like, the service, it's about it's the hospitality industry, right? So they, they want service with a smile, and they'll get it more often if those food service workers are excited about their day.
Definitely.
If I'm not alphabetizing 10,000 food cards
sure, yeah.
at the end of the day.
And I think too that the level of convenience for the customer comes through in getting the right information at the right time when you are in that moment, because alluding to something that Mike was sharing a few minutes ago, I think people now in the digital age that we live in, we are used to having all of the information at our fingertips at any moment. And so if we're trying to make a decision, we can just pull out our phone and, do a quick Google search and get whatever information that we need. And that experience, I think, is often missing in non-commercial food service. And so the paper labels definitely provide some great information. But I think there's a level of depth and then the accuracy to what you both are speaking to that's possible when you've got digital food labels. But I think the ability to have a QR code and to add additional information via Spotlight, I think does give a new level of convenience that I think we're used to outside of non-commercial food service, and it brings it into this industry specifically. So
I love that.
There's convenience on both sides, yeah.
And I would say too, there's also like an engagement level to that too. Like just hearing you talk, I was thinking, I have heard operators say, oh, this is so much easier. I'd be able to put more information out there and tell more of a story about what I'm doing. And so, if you're trying to, sometimes you're looking at calories and you're counting calories, but sometimes you care about sustainability and how was this sourced? Where's it come from? There's all these things that help a customer say, hey, this is a place that cares about the things that I care about. They think about the world the same way I think about it. And that's hard that doesn't really come through on a paper label that's dog-eared, that may not be there or may have some scribbles on it or just has name and price. But if you're telling more of a story through that same tool, it can create a level of connection and engagement with your guests.
One of the
have otherwise.
One of the common themes in non-commercial food service, as we've met with just hundreds and hundreds of operators, is this idea of like, look, I need to do better at marketing. And really, when you kind of peel that onion, what they're trying to tell you is that there's a narrative between behind every one of the foods that they serve. There's a story, and there's a reason why they have selected that menu item to be on the menu that day. And there's this connection of like, we've made these decisions on what we're going to menu because we really understand our customers. We want them to be excited. And whenever that like connection just misfires, and it, quite honestly, like I think too many people feel like it's misfiring, that they're not able to make that connection with those customers. And so they come to us and they're like, we need to do better marketing. But really, like what needs to happen is we just need to do a better job of telling the story and the narrative behind each one of our menu items. Help us do that. And what we're saying is like, this print card that you've been doing for the past 30 years is not doing a good enough job of telling the narrative of the amazing things that you have in your cafe. And you need to kind of up your game, and technology is the way to do that. Being able to build that confidence and share this information at the right time when customers are curious and wanting to know, why should I eat this Reuben sandwich? And telling that story at the right place at the right time is marketing, but it's the narrative that I think all operators in non-commercial food service are craving, are wanting to do better inside each of their cafes and locations.
I love that as a marketer. And also because I think we at Nutrislice fundamentally see the great work that operators do, and the thought, like you were saying, Mike, that they put into their menus and the experience that they're providing their customers. I love anything that helps them tell that story.
Yeah.
So it's really great to hear.
And
Love
it's just
that.
so salient right now. Like I was just at a NACUF's conference, and we're kind of walking the halls, and people were meeting, networking, and people are like, well, tell us what you do. And I got to the point where I was like, I don't even think words can do it. I should just probably open up this food label and just show them. And I just pull out this food label when people said, well, what is Nutrislice? What can you do? And it's like, it's this. And you just see the look on their face, and they're like, it goes off. They're like, oh my gosh, this solves a need, an operator efficiency issue that I need to solve for. It also potentially is going to help me tell better stories. So I just pull it out, and they pull out business cards, and they're like, let's have conversations. We need to learn more about this. I think, it's a product that is a couple years past due. The pandemic has pushed this pain forward. And, Nutrislice, what we're trying to solve and be really good at listening to the space is like, we need to fix this now. It needs to be more technology based. It needs to focus on telling that narrative and the story. It needs to be operationally fluid and easy for anybody to pick up and to use. And when you can get those two things in alignment, that is the magic of Nutrislice. That's the magic of hospitality, of providing really great, delightful experiences for your customers.
So, one of the things that we have heard from operators, beyond wanting to tell their food story, is that they are really trying to move more towards sustainability, both from their own kind of, I think, core values as organizations, but then also what the expectations are from their customers. Can you talk a little bit about the sustainability aspect of something like Spotlight versus paper labels?
Yeah, I think like the sustainability movement in general is becoming more and more important in the food service space.
Yeah.
So operators are being tasked with find ways to make us a more sustainable organization, an operation. And primarily, like, people are looking at this like, how do we decrease food waste? Maybe we need to introduce a composting program. They need something there that they want to do better as it relates to sustainability, because it just tells a better story for the institution, the organization, the earth. Like, there's just, everyone wins, right? And that impacts the customer experience. You've got these kids, the rising generation that care deeply about these issues, and they're making decisions, and their perception of the brand is influenced by like, well, how sustainable, like, how much do you care about what you're doing here? And when they're doing a good job, like, good things happen. And so the question is like, how can I make my program more sustainable? And we're technology, so what technology can do is we can replace some of the old school ways of doing things, especially as it relates to communicating. And historically, you've got a process where you're printing out, digital food, or not digital, but food cards. You're printing out print signage, and you're making these updates, you're making changes. It's just a lot of paper. It's a lot of ink. There's a cost involved to it. And what we're saying is like, yeah, we've got this very lightweight technology, very sustainable. It's going to last for a very, very long time. And as you do this, you're going to be able to replace and not use other solutions that you had in the past, making you a more sustainable organization.
Yeah, one of the pieces of data that I've heard about these digital labels is they are actually expected to last up to 10 million changes.
Yeah.
I do not think that you can say that about your printer cartridge or your printer. Try changing 10 million labels and see what happens to your printer.
There's got to be someone out there that's like, you know what, the pandemic and food shortages, it feels like I'm making 10 million changes on the regular.
Yeah.
Maybe not 10 million.
Yeah, and so I love, one of the things I love about this is that you can tell the story of your food and make sure that your customer understands if there's allergens that they should be avoiding, but also you're helping to tell that sustainability story, and showing that you are putting into practice, what your brand espouses around sustainability, and showing those practices like having a digital label versus constantly swapping out and wasting paper. So love it.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a great conversation, learning all that there is to learn about Spotlight. Because one of our core values here at Nutrislice is to really make our customers the heroes and to make their lives easier. Mike, I'm curious what you would recommend if I'm an operator and I'm listening to this podcast and learning about Spotlight, how should I be thinking about it? What would you recommend are my next steps here?
Yeah, and apologies to anyone on our sales team that might be hearing this, but it's on a call, and the customer, they were so excited to do this. They were like, you know what, I think we probably would like a couple thousand across all our locations. It was a big it was a big customer. And I was like, whew, that's great. Lovely to hear. Because, Spotlight, Nutrislice Spotlight, what this is doing is really changing the way that operations happen. We have to be very sensitive to the operator experience. And Brian, you had mentioned that, I loved what you said, how, Spotlight, this digital food label, is actually very core to the day-to-day activity of an operations team. And so with that, we always would recommend like, hey, let's walk before we run. Let's go a little bit slower. And let's figure out what is the most appropriate, safe, cautious way for you to do this, to innovate and implement some change in the operator experience. We know this is going to work. We've put it together. We've listened. We've done a great job with the product, but we still, need to make sure that the uniqueness of your facilities are ready to receive this type of innovation. So, my recommendation is to go slowly, to think it through, to make sure that, we're testing, we're listening, that the product fits and does exactly what you need it to do, the way you need it to be done, and when it needs to be done. Those are all important variables when you start off with a product like Spotlight.
That's good advice. Brian, anything you would add to that?
No, I'd say that sort of, well, yes, I would say, and that dual motion of walking before you run, doing a smaller deployment, and then working out any kinks, getting your operations well aligned to the technology and the solution, and knowing how you're going to train your folks and what you're asking of them and exactly how it's going to work, makes it so much easier to deploy at scale once you're ready to do that.
Yeah.
So it's
and
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say, Brian, like, in addition, like, we've built this thing, not to just be a fancy, little product that you put in one location where the experience can get that much better. This product was designed to be deployed at scale. It was designed to replace this entire print signage process, to kind of remove it altogether. So even the way it's priced, I mean, it's priced at a point where it makes sense to do this everywhere, to embrace it fully. But the way that we would recommend doing that is to take some steps just to make sure that your teams, everything is aligned properly. And, when it hits and it starts, it's going to be successful.
Well, that sounds maybe like a future podcast episode, which is, around managing change in a non-commercial food service operation. So maybe, we'll put that in, the little bubble, a little pin over there, and maybe that's a future podcast episode.
It's a good idea.
Absolutely. There's some experts out there for sure in the past 2
Yep,
years.
definitely, definitely. All right. Well, before we wrap up and move on, is there any last words around Spotlight that you'd like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got something I'd like to say. I just, in closing, my enthusiasm for Nutrislice Spotlight. I think what we have here is one of the reasons why I'm so excited to be a part of Nutrislice. This is a byproduct of an organization, a software company that has, first and foremost, done a really good job of listening and observing and learning. Just the curiosity around how do we better serve organizations in the food service space? How do we help them? How do we make their lives better? It started with that idea of, hey, we got to be really good listeners. And then we take that information with our product teams and engineering teams, and it's all about then getting creative. And I think the creativity in our group is phenomenal. You match that with really good software developers, and the team is outstanding there. And you just get these ideas that turn into products, and then you match that with like the excitement of bringing it to market, and it's just such a great time to be a part of Nutrislice. It's a great time to be in the food service space. I think these things are truly revolutionary. It's going to simplify the way food service happens, and that is going to have a compounding positive impact on how you take care of your customers. Customer satisfaction is going to be higher, trust. Just the brand is improved as these advancements in technology and how we're supporting the space come to light. So it's exciting. I'm really, really excited to kind of be a part of this over the next few months and see what happens now and into the future.
I'm excited too. It feels like it's a product whose time has come, and I think it's fulfilling to feel like, hey, in an environment where you've got labor shortages and supply chain challenges and coming back to campus or whatever you have going on, you've got the challenges of food service sort of sitting there, this daunting sort of mountain of things to do, fires to put out. And if Nutrislice can just take one painful thing off of your plate so you can focus on all the rest, and that thing is well taken care of, it's easy to manage, it's just one more thing that you don't have to worry about. And that's what we're hoping to be able to do for a lot of folks. And it's exciting to have a solution that, as we talk to people about it, it sounds like it's hitting that nail on the head, and that we are able to make life just a little bit easier.
With that, we will wrap it up. Thank you so much, Brian and Mike. That was a fantastic conversation.
So much fun.
So much fun. I am so curious to hear from all of the operators out there. How did this land with you? Are there pain points that you think Spotlight might be able to help you with? Are there things that you were particularly excited to hear about that are, coming down, new innovations? So hit us up on #PassTheTots on your social channel of choice. We can't wait to hear from you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again,
Thanks,
guys.
Patricia.
Have a good one.
Take care, everybody.
See you next time.